Hi everyone, my name is Teresa and I'm really happy to be here today in Melbourne.
And my name is Andre. Great to be here in Melbourne, in the sunny, warm Melbourne today. Thank you for coming to our talk.
So we're the co-founders of Zunc Studio, which is based in London. Our talk today is titled Everything is Figureoutable, which you'll come to understand why when we talk a little bit about ourselves, our journey, how we came to start Zunc Studio, and also our workflows where we're always figuring things out as we go along. But first, we'll start by playing our showreel so you get a better idea of what we do.
Thank you. So we are on a technical stage, so we have some technical breakdowns to share with you from projects we've done recently. But before we get there, we're gonna introduce ourselves, both as individuals and as a studio, and share a few hopefully useful quick tips. And if you have some time at the end, we would love to answer any questions you might have. So if we were to distill what Zunc Studio is, in one sentence, it would say that Zunc Studio is a 3D and motion design studio based in London and founded in 2021.
And you can find our work online, but also in store, on billboards, at bus stops, in your pocket, at corporate headquarters, on design blogs, at events, and recently at art installations or art galleries. We primarily work on commercial campaigns for brands and agencies all around the world, but also we do research and development projects as well as art installations. This is our lovely office, which is based in Shoreditch in East London, in the loft of a converted Victorian warehouse. And Zunc Studio is made up currently of a team of 6. We're from all over the world, and what really unites us is that we're all very passionate about this industry. Being a small team means that we work really closely together when we have client projects on, we can really put our heads down and get into the zone. But we also have a lot of fun as well, whether that's down at the pub when we have nice weather in London or between client projects when we're working on some sort of new creative experiment between projects. So while Zunc Studio is based in London, our individual journeys actually start from opposite sides of the world. I'm actually a local, I grew up in Melbourne.
And I'm from the opposite side of the world. I'm from Brno, from Czech Republic. And while this talk is about us as a studio, we thought it would be a good idea to introduce ourselves briefly and explain how we got there. So I'll start with a short version of my journey, which starts in Brno, in Czech Republic, at the Faculty of Business, where I studied economics and system engineering. I wasn't a very good student because looking back at it now, design is just way more interesting. But it was during this time when I discovered 3D thanks to a friend of mine outside of uni, not as a part of the course. And I was learning it as a hobby. And I thought it was really fun, a little bit like playing games, but I never thought I could make a living from it. But something changed, something clicked when I discovered this short film called Magma. I thought it was the coolest thing I've ever seen, and I decided to take it seriously from the point on. I don't know if anyone you've seen it here. And they gave me the idea of I wanted to find a dream team. I wanted to meet people who can make stuff like that. So I moved for the first time. I moved to Prague in hopes of finding the dream team there. And I did. I met some amazing artists. Some of them I'm still great friends with to date. And this is my setup there, and a random picture of Prague I found on the internet. And I worked there for local ad agencies and production houses. I was making 2D infographics and VFX stuff, just a little bit of everything to get by. And I always found time for learning and personal work. That's something that was always very important to me and still is. And once I had enough of content in my portfolio, I made my first showreel, which to my great surprise was featured on Motiongrapher in their top 11 showreels of that year. It's all the way back in 2015. And that gave me a great boost of confidence. And on the back of that, I started wondering if I could maybe live and work abroad for the first time. And a friend of mine just got back from Denmark then and kept telling me what a cool place it is, and I didn't have any specific place in mind, so I thought, why not try Copenhagen? So I used my broken English to apply to literally all motion design studios and anything remotely relevant in Copenhagen. And one of them offered me a job. So I moved, went to Copenhagen to meet the dream team there, which is, by the way, where I met with Teresa at a bar. And yeah, this is me cycling to work in snow and working late with my boss Uffe on a sport for local sports news channel. But I didn't stay for a very long time because only a few months in, I got a message from a company called Sponsa. They saw my show reel and they asked me to come to Munich to work on a project for Nike, which then was an amazing opportunity. It still is. We still very much enjoy working for cool brands like that. And I thought that's definitely the place where I was gonna meet the dream team. And I did. Again, it was a great experience. I learned a lot. And I ended up with 2 new Nike commercials in my portfolio. But it was only a 6 months freelance role. So when these projects concluded, I was without a job again. But at this point, Teresa and I already had a plan. We decided that we would like to try living in Tokyo. So we moved to Tokyo, which was a fun experience, not gonna lie. It was something I tried working at the local studio called Birdman, and the language barrier was interesting. I literally had a translator between me and the creative director on briefing me, giving me feedback, stuff like that. But one day I was walking down the street and I saw the very Nike commercial we did at Sponsa. That's when I realized how incredibly open and global this whole industry is, and kind of like a borderless, you can do it from anywhere. And at this point I was getting noticed because of the show reel, the Nike films, and the personal work I was always putting out. And I got offered a job at Future Deluxe in London. I think we have a speaker here tomorrow, Conlon, who I've seen here. I never considered living in London, but that's where many of the studios I admired were. So we moved to London. I worked as a part of this dream team at Future Deluxe for a while and made some really good friends there for life. And it was during this time when I worked on the off London titles for 2017. It was one of the hardest things I've ever pulled off. If you haven't seen it, please give it a watch. It's really trippy. And around this time, there was literally one studio left in the world on my bucket list where I would consider working at. It was a company called Man vs. Machine, also based in London. And they offered me a job, which I accepted, where I got to work with another team of incredibly talented people on projects for Nike, Apple, and other really cool brands. So by now, I had moved from country to country. I worked at many different studios and in general experienced a lot of change. But there was always one thing constant, and it was taking the time for personal work. So over this time, I've been posting my personal work alongside commercial projects on my social media, website, Vimeo, everything like that, Behance. And the combination of this caught the attention of some brands and agencies who started to email me with really cool, interesting job offers, and that led me to quit my job and go freelance. And later on, starting Zunc with Teresa, and where we are working with our own dream team right now.
Yeah, so if we rewind the clock again, my story starts in the very north of Germany, where I was born, in a town called Eckernförde, close to the Danish border. But when I was very young, my family moved to Australia, where I grew up in the suburbs around Sydney, in St Ives, and later in Melbourne, in Diamond Creek. And as a kid, I always loved school. I spent my time reading a lot of books. I was also writing and illustrating my own stories and also doing stuff on computers. In high school, I chose media as one of my final year subjects, and the school I went to had a really good media program with great editing facilities and cameras. And during that time, I made 2 student films, which are terrible, but it was really great to be writing and shooting and editing my own films. And that's when I really could see how I could start to turn my stories into a new medium like film. After high school, I studied a Bachelor of Communications at RMIT, just down the road, where I did a mixed degree in media, writing, and advertising, sort of sampling a little bit of everything when it comes to professional communications. After which I worked in an advertising agency in Richmond. But after a year or 2, I started to get a bit bored in my job, and I think I had something like a quarter-life crisis when I look back now. I had a desire to move out of Melbourne and to experience living somewhere new, maybe somewhere back to my roots in Europe. And I also wanted to study again. I had this craving to be in an educational environment again, because I always loved learning. So I applied to a few unis across Europe. And I was accepted into one in Copenhagen, which is where I met Andre at the bar. I did a master's in tourism. That's my university on the picture on the right, which is in the old Nokia building in Copenhagen. And even though it seems quite random that it was a course on tourism, I still focused it a lot in my projects and things like that on culture and things like film tourism and advertising in travel and tourism. And part of that course was doing an internship semester where, again, I saw this opportunity to move somewhere else, live somewhere else in the world where I could experience a new culture and just kind of go for it. And one of those places that was on my mind was Tokyo, which is why we ended up in Tokyo. So I sought an internship there at a magazine called Metropolis, which you can see on the right-hand side. And I was working as a culture writer, which meant I went to a lot of art exhibitions, music festivals, new restaurants, food festivals, things like that. And I was essentially reviewing them and writing about them, which was a lot of fun. Shortly after we moved to London, when Andre got offered the job at Future Deluxe. And by then I'd finished my degree and I continued working as a writer at a media company. But at this time I was also starting my own YouTube channel, which is now history. But back then I was writing, filming, editing my own videos, which were again about design and culture. So this is where I started to get into motion design. 2D animation and editing led to 3D animation eventually. And at some point there came a time where I knew I had to make a decision whether I would keep working as a writer and do this kind of stuff as a hobby in my spare time, or if I should put my neck on the line and start over and try to make it as a 3D designer. So I decided to quit my job. I told myself that I would dedicate 6 months to learning 3D and that I could always go back to writing if it was a complete failure. I treated it like a full-time job and really held myself accountable by posting my work to a new Instagram that I'd made. And this was one of the first things that I made that really got a lot of attention, and that was quite exciting and very encouraging for me. I thought, oh, cool, maybe I can make this work. Then only 2 months in, I received an email from Studio Moros, which is a studio based in South London, asking what my freelancing day rate was. So here I am at the Spice Girls concert in 2019, which I worked on at Studio Moros. And amazingly, it was the second real project I worked on as a 3D artist. So that was a fantastic opportunity. It was so much fun to be part of the team that helped to make the visuals that were playing on stage behind the 4 out of 5 Spice Girls that were performing then. After a few more months of freelancing, I kept developing my portfolio, and still to this day, I dedicate a lot of time to learning and improving my skills. So eventually I started to go, further than the tutorials that a lot of us use to start with to learn, and I was developing my own sort of style before eventually I started working together with Andre on some of his freelance projects as well. So here you can see our very first home office in London, where we were unknowingly starting Zunc, actually. We never really planned for it to turn into a studio, but here we are today. This is cable management, which I love, in our office in London. And so now Andre and I are still working as designers as well as creative directors at Zunc. As I mentioned, we're a really small team, so we're still very hands-on. And we both see ourselves as lifetime learners. So all of that past experience, figuring everything out as we went along, that's still very relevant today. It still feels a lot like we're still figuring it out. Now we have this business that we're running all of a sudden. And yeah, that's how we got there.
Okay, here are the quick tips. Enough about ourselves. So we're no longer individual artists, but we are running a business. And so this is an advice to our past selves. A few quick tips that we wish someone had told us a few years ago. So the tip number 1 is the case for generalism. Because one of the main reasons why we were able to start a studio is that both of us like doing multiple things. For example, I like doing art direction, kind of like look development, but also building computers, working on the infrastructure, stuff like that. And Teresa has her own areas of interest. So some of these complement and some of these overlap each other. But this kind of like variety in our skill set always allowed us to say yes to many different opportunities. And from our experience, if you can deliver, no one cares if your structure looks like this, if it's a one-man show, or if it looks like this. So as a matter of fact, we've done some of our biggest projects as a team of 2, working from home. So don't limit yourself by thinking you have to specialize in one area, because you're already in a very niche field. So I don't know if this would apply to different fields, but it works very well in 3D and CGI, and especially in the age of digital economy where everything is decentralized and borderless. So be generalist in a specialized field. This mindset is clearly visible in our toolbox, because we encourage everyone in our studio to develop expertise in multiple areas and follow their interests. And that allows us to be most helpful to each other, but also stay motivated in the long run, because learning kind of creates a positive feedback loop. You get good at something, and it's kind of like we think that's like a very sustainable thing to do. But it's about balance. For example, I'm the only one in our team who builds computers, and that's totally fine because I enjoy it and I'm good at it. And there's no reason why everybody on our team should be able to build computers. So it's about a balance in the end.
Tip number 2 is about skills, knowledge, and experience. As a small studio, we've worked with quite a few freelancers and recently had a lot of applications for a new designer role that we opened up. And so we've looked through a lot of portfolios over the few years that we've had the studio, and we noticed that as we were assessing potential designers that we would like to work with, we were looking at them based on these 3 things. So for example, someone might have amazing skills, be very technical, they know the software inside out, but they don't have much knowledge about things like aesthetics or advertising trends, or have little experience in a studio working on real projects. Or it might be someone with 15 years of experience in advertising, but who neglect learning new skills since the beginning of their career. So I think very much like the AI presentation before us, being able to stay up to date with things like that is very important. So what we look for is someone who has a good balance. And that's not to say you shouldn't have a focus on just one thing. In other companies or professions, it's probably fine to be much stronger in only one of these things. But for us at Zunc, a good designer and a good team member will have a good balance across all these 3. So for us, that means skills, which is knowing the software, being able to troubleshoot the software, a knowledge, which is an understanding of the broader context of things like design theory or marketing trends, or a knowledge of the industry or the clients you're working for, and experience, which is applying those skills and the knowledge in the real world on real projects with other people as well.
And the last tip, which is the simplest, but by far, I think the most important, is be organized. This is something, I hope you can see it, this is something we came across on our NAS recently. Nobody wants to come across a file that's called cloner sausage 01, puff remesh 3, remesh 2 sausage 01, puff remesh 3, remesh sausage 01, puff remesh 3, remesh, or even worse, null. So stay organized. It is a sign of respect to your teammates, and it really keeps your sanity in the long run.
So that was a bit about us and the studio, how we figured it out up until this point. Now we're going to look at some projects and get into some more of the technical side of things. We're going to start with a project that we've sort of kind of released, but not really, so you're some of the first in the world to see it. It's something we're calling for now Coccyx. And we're going to start by playing a short film.
So, thank you. Thank you. So what you just saw is a case study on sunglasses. And, in our field, I think a lot of visual artists, photographers, 3D artists, everybody, a lot of people do spec work, which means you take an existing product of existing brand, and then you do kind of work that you are hoping to attract more of in the future. And we wanted to do just that, but not with an existing brand. So we actually kind of made our own glasses. We made them both as a 3D object, but also as a real pair, which we have here.
So because this was a self-initiated or studio project, the design process was a bit all over the place, but we did have two very clear inspiration sources to start with, which are shown here by these two books that we have in our studio. So the first source of inspiration was an exhibit that we saw at the Design Museum in London called Waste Age. It was really interesting. It was sort of exposing a lot of the waste problem that humans have created on Earth, you know, all the consumption and all the pollution and all the bad stuff. But it was also a really interesting exhibit because aside from the doom and gloom, there was a whole section which was all of these incredible products that different companies from all around the world have been creating using new materials. So there was a lot of biomaterials and more sustainable solutions to things like single-use products. And one of the things that really stuck in our memory was this vase, which was 3D printed using a filament made from algae, which made it very biodegradable, but still usable. And the second big inspiration source was H.R. Geiger, who is most famous for having designed the alien in Alien.
Yeah, so we really enjoyed this kind of paradox, connecting these two seemingly very disconnected ideas, that on one hand we are drawing inspiration from this nightmare fuel. These frames for these glasses are very kind of like organic, reminding bones, but then we're thinking, okay, if we're gonna create real product, let's make it biodegradable.
So as I mentioned, it was a very non-linear workflow. When we started thinking about how are we going to design a new pair of sunglasses, we tried all sorts of things. So we used AI to generate some ideas. We sketched some frames. We sculpted it straight away in 3D using various different softwares. Here you can see that we tried a liquid simulation on the shape of a face to try and get a frame that was like perfectly molded to your head. We scanned our own heads and tried some different frames on there. And all of this was a fun exercise, but at some point we realized the limits to our own knowledge, and we accepted that eyewear design and this sort of product design was one field of expertise that wasn't figureoutable in a matter of weeks or months. So we started with a new approach, and we decided to start from an existing pair of sunglasses and sort of remix those.
Yeah, so this is me playing in a program called 3D Code. It's not a very well-known sculpting tool, but I really like it because it has some interesting features that allow you to cut holes through the mesh without necessarily having to worry about the topology because it's voxel-based. So this is where I created the kind of base form for these frames, after which I took it into ZBrush, which is great because it allows me to get really nice, clean topology. And I can then reproject the high poly detail from 3D Code back on this mesh. And then at this point, I'm just kind of like letting the shape, the form of the glasses lead my hand. This is a very meditative process for me, where I'm just kind of adding details a little bit and kind of emphasizing some areas. So some detailing here and a little bit more here. This is the final design, or like the current design, because we've gone through, I think, maybe 10 different prototypes. So this is the current one. And these are some first renders we've created.
But a big part of this was not only creating the 3D model, which you just saw, but also physically creating them. So inspired by that Waste Age exhibit and the process of 3D printing, we decided to try that for the first time. So here you can see the 3D printer, and then on the top right, that's the slicing software, which we import the model into to create the model that's then printed layer by layer. And then we started to get our first prototype. So this is the second one, I believe, but it was very far from perfect. So we had a few iterations of going back and changing the model. Here you can see that we tried a version that would be 3 pieces that we would connect with hinges, which still failed. And this is a bit of a showcase of the, I think, first 9 different prototypes that we have, where you can see that the shape and the width and the length of everything changes a little bit over time. So it's something that we're still figuring out. Oops, that's meant to be playing, but it's not. Oh, there it is.
just a bit of a proof of concept we shot in the studio with Teresa as a model.
Yeah, our colleague Fila asked me to stand in for a model, and I had no idea what he would turn that into, but I must say I look quite cool, so thanks to Fila for that. But what we really liked about this process of having both the 3D model and the physical product, as you just saw, is that we could start to play with some mixed media work. So it was really fun for us to combine those renders together with some film, or we're about to show you some street photography that we've also done in London. So we took some pairs of the glasses, or Fila and Jake did. They spent the afternoon walking around Shoreditch near our office and finding the coolest looking people that were just walking around and asking them to model the glasses. Apparently everyone was like super friendly and was like very open to wearing the glasses, and I feel like they just look so good on everyone.
Yeah, so we don't know where we're going to take this project next. It's very much a work in progress. We are actually currently talking to an eyewear designer. She might help us figure it out, if it's something we can do with it, because currently they don't have hinges, they keep breaking apart, and they're not very comfortable. But they look cool, so we'll see. We'll see what happens.
So the next project we want to talk about is some work we've done for Crocs. We've worked with Crocs a few times over the last 2 years, always for social media videos to reveal the new colours of this particular shoe, which is a collaboration between Crocs and a footwear designer called Salehi Bembury. They're a really nice client to work with because they never actually have a brief, which is, you know, scary but amazing at the same time. They just say, these are the shoes, this is when we need to release them. And so it's always up to us to come up with something for these videos. One thing we do keep in mind, because it's a video for social media, is that they need to be eye-catching or thumb-stopping, as some people like to say. And for Crocs, it was important that we show the shoe within the first 3 seconds of the video. And over the course of these multiple videos we've made by now, we have this running theme of revealing the shoes in different outdoor environments, inspired by the colours and the names of the colours, as if these were their natural habitats. As I mentioned, this particular shoe is a collaboration between 2 brands. So for us, it was important to deliver something that both clients would be happy with. So Crocs is pretty easygoing, they're very youthful, they became famous for being an ugly shoe, so they're not afraid to poke fun at themselves. And Salehi Bembury, on the other hand, is quite an esteemed footwear designer, so he's designed shoes for Versace, he goes to all the Paris Fashion Weeks every year, so he's on a different sort of level. But he's also known for hiking every day, and he's a great advocate for spending time outdoors, which is also why we decided to go with this nature theme when we were showing these shoes. Before most projects, if not all of them, that's for sure, we receive samples. So here is a picture I like to say is Crocsmas at the office, when we receive samples, and it's always nice when they come in our size. And today we want to do a breakdown of a video we did for this shoe. The colour was called Urchin, it's this light purple. So when we started brainstorming what this video could be to reveal this new shoe, we were finding inspiration from underwater and coastal environments. And one image that really struck out to us was this mangrove. So rolling with that, we started researching mangroves a bit more, and they're really cool. When we were researching them, we discovered they're the only tree that can survive in salt water. They're great at protecting the coastlines from things like rising tides, and they're also very efficient at sequestering carbon. They also look really cool. I love this image of the tunnel where you see this forest of mangroves, but also these single mangroves by themselves are very striking, especially with their very unique roots. At the same time, we were working in a software called SpeedTree. Here you can see that we're placing one of the Crocs in a shelf tool. I don't remember what it's called, but we thought, oh, okay, that's kind of a cool effect, but in the end we felt it was too messy and we couldn't really art direct it. So we decided to take a different approach. This illustration was also a big inspiration source, so we thought maybe we could showcase the shoe in a similar way. It looks very elegant, the way that it's like, could be held up by a mangrove, maybe in this way. So we did a first proof of concept using this really long tree, which we brought into Cinema 4D, and using a good old spline wrap, we tested how this tree would look wrapped around the shoe. And that was good for a really quick proof of concept, but by now we'd already fallen in love with this idea of the mangrove because it was just the perfect symbolism. So yeah, we wanted to play homage to that. So we didn't want to go with any ready-made assets. I think this is an apple tree, which was just completely irrelevant. So I decided to model a mangrove tree. One source of inspiration I like using for things like this are botanical illustrations, because they really simplify and they do stylize the tree, but they break it down into their most distinctive parts, which is a really good reference material for that matter. So here we are in Speed Tree. This is the beginning of making the tree, starting with the trunk, then adding the main branches, so checking those references to make sure that the distribution and the amount of branches matches more or less, adding the smaller branches to those main branches. Then here, adjusting the noise in the branches to add a little bit more of organic randomness in there. Then adding the twigs that the leaves would eventually grow from. So I think mangroves roughly have about 5 leaves per branch. Then adjusting the angles of those according to how much they're reaching towards the sky. Then extending those parts for the leaves, adding the leaves and adjusting the width and the bend and the shape of those leaves. And here you can see the assembly of the tree and also the node tree on the left, where you can see how this tree is built quite procedurally. It's a great software. I think they mainly use it for game assets, but we quite like where we discovered it and we thought, oh, this is quite cool. We can roll with this for some projects. Because also they have this great inbuilt animation tool, which is a little bit janky, but once you figure it out, it actually has really nice organic looking growth animation just out of the box, which is great. I think especially this sort of wobble as the leaves and branches grow, that feels really realistic. So that was perfect for this project. So here we are back in Cinema 4D, which is the main software that we use for all of our projects at this moment. This is the model that the client supplied us. Yeah, it's a bit crazy looking, but we made it work. This is a little bit of the behind the scenes of the shading. So you can see we use Octane render. You can see here how we're previewing the size of the bump to make sure it's the right size before we actually go and render it, which is one way to save time, especially when you're working with displacement, which can take a while to render. And here we are putting it all together. We've got that spline wrap from the beginning. We've got the roots that we made in SpeedTree, then an export of the alembic of the growth animation from SpeedTree, and putting it all together there. And here are some of the render passes, so you can see a little bit about how we lit it and composited it all together. And I'll play you the final video now. And then finally, after we delivered this project, it's always nice to get nice feedback from the client. So they sent us these pictures. That's Silly Hibembry there at the headquarters at Crocs in Colorado. So I think they were really happy with the campaign. They had the videos on display in their office, which was really nice to see.
So the last project we have a breakdown of is called Photosystem 2, which was first large-scale installation we held last year in Kunsthalle in Prague, in Czech Republic. We created 6 digital artworks. It was during a Signal festival. I believe you have something similar here called White Night. Yeah, so that's something similar. And because it's a festival of light, and by now maybe you can tell we like playing around with plants, we came to the idea of working around the theme of photosynthesis by combining these two. So today, we're not going to look at all of the 6 artworks, but just on one of them. It's this main one that was 4 minutes long, and it was projection around 3 big walls. And it was really cool because when you stand in it, it feels like you're flying through these organic structures. And the kind of idea behind this piece was that because plants have evolved from single-celled organisms to rather complex ones, we wanted to reflect that in this artwork. And so the plants are, over these 4 minutes, becoming progressively more complex. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but these are the individual sections. But also, because this was non-commercial, not a commercial project, it was kind of important for us to make it with as little effort as possible. So we posed this challenge to ourselves, can we make a long format animation with just 2 keyframes with minimum effort? And so that's how we approached it, and this is how we made it. So first we defined 4 main sections that we would kind of fly through, and each was covered in different plans, but it's all driven just by the motion of the camera. So as the camera is going through the space, you only see what's right in front of it, and it disappears as soon as you passed that section, because that also allowed us to have like tens of millions of individual plans while keeping the scene relatively light. The individual sections or the structures were created in Houdini by just playing around with Voronoi fracture and then bringing it back into Cinema, where we were able to put them together and just see what it feels like when the camera is flying through this space. Once we had that in place, I developed a pretty simple system in Cinema 4D where I parented a bunch of different fields and kind of random effectors to the camera itself. So as I said before, you only see what's right in front of the camera, and it disappears as soon as we are past that section. Once this system was working, I was able to apply it at scale. This is not a real time, because even though it was kind of light, it's still, like tens of millions of individual clones, so it was pretty slow. But this was kind of like a proof of concept that it works. And then in contrast to the Crocs project that Teresa was talking about, where she had one main plant, and it was important that it's kind of like, it's a hero plant, so she had to make it all from scratch. In this case, because we had so many different plants and none of them were that important by themselves, we just resolved to work using many different banks. Some of these actually were created from scratch, but most of them just came from Megascans or Exterior and places like that. And then finally, it was just a matter of applying a few different lights, shaders, and seeing kind of like work. This is basically going through the AOVs and different multipasses and seeing how it looks together. One thing that we are quite proud of was the challenge of distance, because we are based in London and the gallery is based in Prague. And we quickly realized that we have no clue what the content feels like at scale. So we asked the gallery if they could share with us their 3D or their architectural plans, which they were able to do. So, and that allowed us to basically teleport ourselves into the gallery in VR in our studio and do a lot of different kind of testing without having to fly to Prague. And that really changed how we saw these different artworks, because in some cases we thought that, this is really boring, this is really slow, it doesn't work on a computer screen. But then if you're standing inside of it and it's just all around you, it had a completely different feeling. So it was kind of a good way for us to test it all out. And here's just some behind the scenes of us installing it. It was really cool to see our work in a gallery at a large scale, because we are used to mainly seeing it on computer screens. So yeah, it was really cool to see all of the visitors enjoying it, and we even created one interactive piece, which you can see in the middle. Do you have anything to add to this one?
No, it was really fun. Yeah, that's the end of our talk, so thank you very much.
Wonderful. And have a look at these shoes. Can you show everyone your shoes? We'll stand up there.
Wait.
Oh. And let's give him an extra big round of applause for coming all the way out from London, please. Come in. Gee, I thought I was tall, but I guess I'm not. Have we got any questions from the audience? Hand in the back. Get ready for questions. Come in. Oh yeah, you've got that.
Hello? Oh, yeah, sorry. I feel like you listed quite a spectrum of programs. There were so many there. Can you tell me what are your bread and butter programs and what are you excited to learn more about in future?
Sure. We had one slide there, but I think we might have just skipped over it, which showed the funnel of the softwares that we use most commonly. So Cinema 4D is probably our like hub of where we render everything out of. But we also use a lot of different softwares like SpeedTree I mentioned. I think we had a little bit of Houdini in there, ZBrush from the glasses as you saw. So we often like use different softwares for specific purposes, but then always bring them into Cinema to set up the shaders and arrange the animation and the cameras and everything and render from there. I would say that the one we're more excited to use is Houdini. All of our designers have been, and ourselves included, have been learning more and more of Houdini, and not just going beyond just creating stuff in the Vellum setups, but also learning how to render from Houdini. So that's something that we're really excited to get more into.
Thank you.
Sorry, over here there's a question. Yeah, there we go. You're quite a young team, which a lot of our industry is. Do you feel at any time, I mean, I don't know what the word here would be, like a tall poppy syndrome thing, being so young, but then you seeing like man versus machine, and you've been in these places that have incredible teams, tons of experience, going out together as a young team, are you naturally quite confident in that space, or is that something that you find you do, it makes you hold back sometimes to think this is bigger than us, or we're not the right ones here, we can't deliver, that sort of thing?
I think we're not in a rush, and we are small and nimble teams, so we do actually find ourselves pitching against these big companies, which is super exciting. We lose most of the time, but yeah, even if we win 1 in 10 projects, like that usually just pays, just kind of like compensates for, us spending a lot of time on just kind of like playing around and wasting time around. So I don't know if I'm answering the question, but do you want to add anything?
Yeah, to add to that, I would say it's sort of a good thing and a bad thing. So in some cases, we've definitely lost pitches when we've asked why. And I think it's been because maybe we don't have as much experience or as much authority or a big enough team. So in that case, it's not great. But on the other side, like Andre said, we can also be quite nimble. And I think sometimes it depends on the brand or the campaign. But sometimes I think that clients look to us because we have some sort of maybe more youthful flavor than other established companies, and that's sort of what they want to have as part of their own campaign. So in those cases, I think it helps us.
Yeah, I would like to add, we recently learned that there are different phases to buying process, which we didn't consider before. But so the first phase of buying process would be when the clients are excited because you have cool work, and at the late stage of the buying process, they are worried about everything that can go wrong. And that's probably where we lose it most of the time, because we are not big company. We don't have the reassurance of a company like Man vs. Machine or Future Deluxe. Yeah.
What's the landscape like in London for work, and especially this year? I don't know. Here, it's been a tough year economically here. I don't know what it's been like over there.
Yeah, I mean, similar. I think we had a few quiet months this year. I feel like before Christmas it's really picked up again, especially as we're traveling now. It seems like we're so busy right now, we've just abandoned the team in London. But it was definitely a quieter year. I would say that it's quite interesting because not many of our clients are actually from London. So we get a lot of clients out of the US or from within Europe and other places, which is kind of a strange phenomenon, but we've definitely seen that it's been different this year compared to others. Yeah.
But it's not just for us. We know for sure that it was more quiet and difficult this year because most of our friends are from the same industry. So actually we hang out with a lot of people from Future Deluxe, from Man vs. Machine, from XK Studio. We have a nice community in London. So we know, we speak, and we know that it was for sure a bit more quiet this year.
We'll just get a microphone down the front, please.
Thanks for the talk. That was amazing. I guess a question, Andre, you've worked in a lot of studios. What's been the favorite studio you've worked in and why?
Of course.
And also another add to that, Octane. Are we all, is it time to go back?
Yeah, I think it's definitely time to go back to Octane. We actually never left Octane. We never switched to Redshift. It's just nice. It's like photography, you know, like the IPR is really fast. It just looks really good out of the box. Favorite studio, definitely Future Deluxe. It was a really hard time when I was working on the off titles there, but you know, it's a Conlon, by the way, speaking. He works for Future Deluxe.
That's why I asked. It was just ramping up Future Deluxe.
Yeah. Eichspons also in Germany was amazing experience.
Being so small and nimble, it seems like you guys are picking up all this knowledge just on the fly. So when it comes to software and methods and pipelines, do you guys just like Google how to use this new software as you need it? Or how do you pick up all this new knowledge as you go along with these projects?
Yeah, I mean, that's like, you know, that's why we wanted to call the talk Everything is Figureoutable, because it's exactly like that. You know, we might try a new software for a particular project and just try it out. Sometimes it's a fail and we just go back to our like trusty software for something else. But for example, with the SpeedTree project, that was something where we were like, oh, we're not really sure if this is going to be the right tool for it. Like we can also build a similar sort of setup in Houdini, but let's just check this one out first. So it's usually, yeah, like YouTube tutorials, or I mean, there's just like so much knowledge available online, like from the software developers themselves, or just like other people, you know, making tutorials as well. So we really rely on the internet for learning all those things, for sure.
Hey, nice. This was a really good talk. Thank you. You mentioned pitching a couple of times in your talk. I just wanted to ask how you feel about it, whether you do a lot of it, what your take is on it.
We only pitch on projects that we really, really like. So we try not to pitch as much.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know, it takes a lot of effort. It's fun to do like short sprints, especially when we're doing like actual renders or like actual tests. You know, we can make shorter pitches, which is just like finding references or thinking of concepts, like that takes less time. But when we're really investing a lot of our time and our team's time into making new renders and putting forward ideas, it can be disheartening, of course, when you lose pitches, but then you know, it's a really great feeling when you win pitches, because it's also like a strange feeling to be like, oh, we don't pitch, and that just means that you're out of the running for that job potentially.
But also, recently we started asking our clients, why did you come to us? And that changed a little bit how we approach the project or the pitch potentially, because if they do come to you because of your style, you are more likely to actually, like, it's not such a waste of time as if you are just another number in the bid.
What would you recommend to someone here who might be thinking about starting a new studio for the first time? Would there be any advice you would give to getting that first successful pitch for the project that they're looking for?
I think it's kind of tricky, because in our position, like, the amount of personal work we were both putting out kind of eventually rolled into getting the opportunities to work at those studios, which in return made us have also commercial work, and the combination of both, I guess, was the reason why we got approached. I suppose we also had few opportunities to be represented. I suppose that is also a viable path in getting the chance to pitch or to work for interesting brands and clients.
Yeah, like through an agent or something, that can be quite useful. I think, I feel like we're seeing a lot of like studios popping up similar size to ours or smaller. It's like, I think it's really nice when you have like a friend or a partner who you can, you know, team up with and work on projects together. But then I think if you do decide to grow it much larger, then there's a lot of other questions that come into the mix, and then you're no longer just a designer, you know, you're having to do human resources and managing people and being able to deliver feedback in a way that's not going to, like, you know, make or break someone. So yeah, it's a lot.
With that in mind then, is there a conscious goal to stay nimble and small? Do you not plan on going larger, or would you rather be like a team of 10, for instance? Yeah,
it's a really good question, and something that we've thought about, I think, more recently, because I do think we sort of fell into like starting a studio a little bit, but we have, you know, looked at our competitors and thought about For example, a larger studio with much larger overheads because they have bigger salaries, like the kind of work that they can take in will need to have much larger budgets as well, which really limits potentially the kind of client base that you can work with. So I think being small and nimble means that we can take some of the lower budget projects. Like once in a while we do have like our big budgets projects that help us, you know, stay up and running for the year, but then it means that we have the flexibility to take on those smaller ones where we're more passionate about the creative or the brand or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So
That's
I think we want to stay small, maybe a little bigger, but not huge.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. If you were to start a studio, just try to take on even like the really bad budget projects. They're just gonna really look good and attract the kind of work you want to do.
Yeah, it's always a question for us, like, you know, budget is one thing from a project, but also like, can we put it in our portfolio? And it's also going to like help our brand and be a strong piece in our portfolio. That's also a big thing to consider for us.
Because we've done we have a few like comparatively big budgets to some of these big studios that were mentioned here, but sometimes it was work we can't show, right? So on one hand it pays the bills, on the other hand doesn't really advance you as a studio.
One more up the back. Oh, we've got two more quick. No, you can. No? Okay, one up the back.
Hey, so you guys mentioned the Signal Festival in Prague. Did you guys end up pitching for that, or were you approached to do that by the festival?
We were approached because I'm from Czech Republic, and the guys who organized it, they kind of knew about me for a while, or about us as a studio, and that's why they kind of just like offered, and we said yes, and then it was 4 months of hard, stressful work.
Cool.
Yeah.
And did you see much sort of kickback from that in terms of more work based off that kind of style and big screen stuff you worked on?
Oh yeah, we actually, while the original budget wasn't great, on the back of it we were able to license it, which actually made us realize like, all right, it's actually like viable business model doing this kind of work, because it's kind of like a passive income. Right now it's being played in Budapest, where we got like, you know, licensing fee for it. It already played
In Shanghai?
in Shanghai.
I think, yeah.
And now we are redeveloping it, so we're actually going to put some work into it, but we're going to have it also in Madrid in January. So yes.
Awesome, thanks.
Anyone else? Any takers? We do. You are Ken. Yeah.
Hello there. What was it like working in Tokyo?
In Tokyo, how was it?
How was it working in Tokyo?
Yes.
What was the question?
Yeah.
It was very interesting. Yeah, like I said, I tried working at this company called Birdman. They are award-winning, really crazy, technical, very interesting agency. But there was me and one French girl as like not Japanese, and so it was really hard. I didn't work there for a very long time, but when I did, they literally had to have a translator for me to understand what the briefing is and what the feedback is.
Thanks.
Hello. Being a young design team, are you conscious about pitching kind of like eco-conscious, projects, like ethics in your project? So like, for example, you use recycled materials for the glasses, which is great. And you have a lot of like nature-inspired projects. Are you, bringing in kind of like climate conscious in a climate crisis that we're in? Are you helping educate clients, or like, are you helping pitch, eco-conscious works,
Yeah, I mean, like, we would love to. I think it's a tricky one because we mainly work in advertising, so it's essentially just like selling more stuff. But we are selective about who we work with, and even if that means that it's just about like celebrating nature in the visuals as part of the campaign, like that's a really positive thing. We're trying our best. Like, we also consume a lot of energy having all those big, powerful computers, but we're working on renewable energy in that case. With the glasses, like trying to promote more sustainable materials. but yeah, it's tricky. Like, I wouldn't say that we're like the most ethical or the best, like most sustainable company, but I think it does help us to like make some decisions when it comes to like what we're working on, or like how we're showing some like concepts. If we just keep that in mind, that like, okay, maybe we can like have this like celebration of nature, because we like to say as well that nature is like the best source of inspiration, like the best designer, really. Like, there's so many amazing examples of where nature has just figured it out itself, and it's like just such a good design in so many different cases. So yeah.
Time for one more question, if there is one. Going. Oh, it's a fight over here.
You were mentioning a lot of personal projects. I just want to know, how do you keep the motivation of your personal projects? I think a lot of people kind of just get in the mindset of just working and crank the handle kind of work. How do you keep that passion for personal projects?
I think the hardest thing for us now is probably finding the time. But yeah, as I mentioned, we did have like a couple of quieter months or weeks this year, and I think just like really languishing, or no, not languishing, sorry, I don't know the right word, but like enjoying those like free time moments to explore new software. I think a lot of ideas usually comes from like trying a new technique, or yeah, trying a new software and seeing like, oh, let's like learn something from that, and then you can turn that into some sort of new personal work. What do you think?
It kind of ties back to the commercial work and the pitching, and the fact that we try to stay small, because that allows us to take on projects that excites us. And I think that kind of helps you stay motivated, because for me, it doesn't work. Like, I don't get much motivated by just the budgets. Although of course it's really important, but I want to be excited to go to work on something cool I really enjoy. So with that, we kind of, I guess, stay motivated and inspired.
Alrighty, sorry, we'll have to leave it there. I'm sure you can ask questions with Therese and Andre during the day. Can we give them a big round of applause? Thanks, guys. Thanks for being here.